All right. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the first gen Fireside series. Today we'll be going over resume development. So this will be an ongoing series. So I'll be able to talk about professional development, personal finance, just first gen experiences, as well as student life at Michigan. I want to first introduce myself. My name is Johnny Huang. I am a junior studying industrial and operations engineering, and I'm also the president of First Gen. I'm originally from New York, specifically Brooklyn. So I went to school in downtown Brooklyn. I'm pretty into cycling. So if you want to reach out to me about road cycling, feel free to do so. And I've been a part of First Gen since the fall of 2018, more actively during the winter of 2019. I served as a student advisory board member, as well as the corporate relations director. And then now I am the president of First Gen. So if you'd like to be interested in getting involved with First Gen or becoming a board member, feel free to reach out as well. So big disclaimers, I am not a recruiter. I am not a career coach. I am not a financial advisor. So take my advice as you will, and you really should be taking the advice of everyone as they come. So take everything with a grain of salt. You know, everybody comes from different perspectives, and the best way to really learn is to do it yourself, research, and those two specifically will sort of give you the lessons that you will need for further on in life. That being said, with resumes, I would like you to think about yourself, putting yourself in the position of a hiring manager or a recruiter. So what is the goal of your job basically? It's basically to find talent within an application pool and decide whether or not to proceed with them to an interview phase and link them to the correct teams. Or if you're the hiring manager yourself, would this person be a good fit for my team? But the problem is you have a lot of applicants to sort through. You're this boomer, you have thousands and thousands of eager high school students or university students looking to apply to your position or your team. And they basically all look the same. They all come from the same majors, the same universities. They still have the same amount of skills. They're not very diverse, to be honest. A lot of university students have the same backgrounds. That being said, how do you decide which applicants to interview? That is the big issue. So your resume serves its purpose to act as a first impression, to be that one story fits all prototype as to whether or not you should be considered for candidacy. In a nutshell, there is the what, the why, and the how of your resume. So what is your resume? It's basically all your qualifications, and your qualifications can mean your education, your experience, and your skills. Those are the big three. And this is your substance. This is not the drugs, but this is your content. This is what you're trying to tell or get across. And the second part to resumes is the how. So this is your self-presentation. This is how you will be designing your resume. So these two are really important because they will tell your story. And this is the big important thing, because without substance, without the content, and without design, there is no great story. And if you think about it in terms of filmmaking, your what or your actual qualifications is the plot, and the how is the storytelling. So you can have good storytelling but poor plot, and it'll be a really bad movie. And you can have really good storytelling and bad plot, and it'll still be a bad movie. So you have to balance both elements, and the same goes for your resume. But in the end, if I had to favor one over the other, it's more important to have qualifications than it is to have, good self-presentation. You can have a resume with a lot that's really nice, but it doesn't really tell the recruiter anything or the hiring manager anything. So I would prioritize qualifications first of which. Another analogy is one to sort of fashion and how you present yourself with your own clothes, for example. So just hear me out. So your clothes is a representation of the skills and experience you have. So let's say your suit represents a job at JP Morgan, a sweater represents an internship at Facebook. And if you worked at a startup, that could be a tank top, right? It's pretty diverse. You can mix and match. And this doesn't just mean your tops. This could mean your bottoms and your shoes. They all represent characteristics that come with this your experience and your skills and your projects. Um, and that being said, the worst case scenario is that you don't have any clothes to wear. So that means your resume is empty and naked. That's the worst case scenario. It's always better to have something on than to leave your resume blank. And the second part to your resume or your fashion is how you actually wear your clothes. So it's your self presentation, it's how you actually put things together. And there's different things like to your style. So like you can't have it too loose or you can't have it too tight. You got to make sure the clothing articles are very tailored to your own body type. The colors are well coordinated and they match well. And especially with the times, like fashion changes over time, and so do resumes, but to a lesser extent. There's always going to be the essentials, and resumes have their own essential parts to themselves. So putting this together, what your resume is, it's like an outfit. So you have your education on top, that's your headwear. You have your experience, which is your top. So it's like what people see or recognize the most. It's when they're looking at you. Your projects, your leadership, your volunteering, and other experiences sort of go under your pants. Like nobody really cares about this as much as your top, but it's still relatively important. And skills are also very important. I think shoes, people look at shoes or like they judge you on your shoes too, but lesser so than like your whole entire outfit. And a lot of people will look at you from top down. So it's the same thing with your resume. They'll look at you from your education downwards. So think of it that way. And with this being said, even if you have a bad, like a bad, if you have bad or limited clothes, right? It doesn't mean you'll have a bad outfit. So it's really about combining those pieces together, because you can still have, mediocre clothes and you can still have really good style. And if you put it together, it'll still be a good outfit. And with, mixing these items, fashion is pretty difficult. Like I went to a middle school with just black and white uniforms. So it took me a while as well. But once you start to like understand the fundamentals, it takes years to develop and to perfect your sense of style. It really should be like a lifelong thing. But again, mixing these two elements, your design and the contents of your resume is important. So here's the truth about resumes. To be honest, most resumes are not good. They are either poorly designed or they sort of lack substance to them. But the good thing is some are great. Those are the ones that stand out and make it to the interviews. And none of them are perfect. No resume is perfect. And you should never think that your resume is perfect or anyone else is perfect. There's always room for improvement. And it should always be changing. So I want to make sure that this is clear. And it's okay if like your resume is still not as to the level that you want. You should always strive for perfect, although, it doesn't really exist. All right, so what actually does make a good resume? At a glance, it should answer these three questions. So who are you? What's your name, your phone number, your email, and your LinkedIn profiles or online profiles. That specific information should be accessible in order for a person to reach out to you. Two is your resume easily scannable from a high level? So can I sort of glance at your experience, your skills, what job positions really quickly? And am I able to actually read your job details for each of those positions or about your actual degree, what you studied? That should be formatted well for an easy scan. Three, can the recruiter get a sense of what your main talents are? So this sort of falls in line with what is your story? Like, what are your essential skills or what sort of background do you come from? What sort of industry do you come from? Those are the questions that the recruiter should be able to glance and understand at a moment's notice. In terms of the contents themselves, and what they should answer is, does this application have the skills and experience necessary to complete this job? Can I see this person executing the job successfully? And the most important, because there could be thousands of applicants, is why should I hire this applicant over others? Like, what is the competitive edge? What is the opportunity cost, basically? So think of those specific questions when you like take a look at your resume. Also tailor your resume. That's also pretty good as well. So here's an example of a resume. I just straight up pulled this from the ECRC Student Career Guide. It's a pretty good resume in terms of formatting. So we'll go over that first. So specific techniques and tips. I won't try to go over this too much because there's a lot of articles on this and you can look online. And a lot of this is really specific to a person's resume. So feel free to reach out to me during office hours for those specific feedbacks. All right, so design. So make sure that it's a single column resume. So there's no sort of table and you don't have to like look at quadrants or anything. It's important that the resume, recruiter can just scan top down and left to right. And in terms of the big bullet points, like the top of the top. So this should be your heading, your basically your personal information, your education, your experience, your project/volunteering, and your skills, and that should be in descending order. Although as you progress in your career, that could definitely change. Your experiences should be in descending date order. So typically, your most recent position should be on the top, and then as they become older in relevance, they should go towards the bottom. You can also group specific positions if they fall into the same company. And in terms of consistency, make sure that verbiage, especially, and even the design itself is aligned with each other. So if you use ing, make sure that follows with everything else. Or if you use the ed like post tense for past positions, make sure that's consistent amongst all your job positions. Also with like bullet points, your dates, and yeah, everything that really follows from that. And white space for readability, just make sure that your words aren't crammed together. There's enough white space for readability and like separation of ideas. In terms of content, make sure that your details are outlined by their impact, then their actions, and then whatever processes and tools that you've used. There's other ways to organize this, but I think having impact the first is what will make it easiest to your hiring managers that there were results to your actual position. And use descriptive action verbs. So sort of things like managed, developed. There's a whole catalog of these verbs and they're pretty accessible online. Make sure that they actually have substance to it. They show initiative and action by yourself. Be concise with your job positions or when you explain your positions or your jobs. Typically, I would like them to no more than 3 lines or no more than 2 lines. They should ideally be 1 line, but if you need the extra room to explain something, that's totally fine. Just be concise with it. Keep it simple. And the last thing is the biggest aspect to the actual contents is your results. And this doesn't have to be extremely like you don't have to save the world or anything, but if you reduce something by like 5% or 10% or increase something by a certain percentage or save some amount of money, even something as simple as that is really important to conveying to whoever's taking a look at your resume. All right, so again, design makes your resume accessible, but the content will actually provide you the opportunity to be able to move on. It's your qualifications again. So the big question is, especially for freshmen or sophomores, what if I don't have any experience, right? It's sort of like which came first, the chicken or the egg? Do I get a job first or do I sort of try to accumulate experience first? But if I don't have an experience, how do I get a job? So if you don't have experience, let's say you don't have an internship lined up or a job, what do? You're lost. So this is a whole list that I sort of just came up from the top of my head. So the big one is projects. This is specifically amongst especially easy for computer science students, but it can really go any way across all majors. And this is basically self-initiative or taking initiatives or class projects and framing it as experience, right? Because in the workforce, we also have projects, right? They're just over long term or under a certain duration or split amongst different people. But it's the same thing that goes with class experience or class projects or your own personal projects. And this is the biggest indicator that this person has done something. He or she has took the initiative and has had some sort of result from it or has done some experimentation. So this is really powerful for getting into an entry level position. And as you go, you can sort of take off from this and rely less. But I think this is a really good indicator to an employer. Two is your relevant skills. And I use this when I first started. The biggest ones are your soft and technical skills. So you can leverage both of them. Depending on what position it is, both are really important. Although in the end, I think technical would probably matter more because in an interview, you would actually demonstrate your soft skills. Three is part-time jobs. If you worked at a restaurant or some sort of ice cream shop, they're always great to have in order to show that you're responsible, you can deal with people, and those are still valuable experiences. Fourth is clubs and organizations. And this is specifically geared towards one, involvement, and two, leadership. So things like Fresh and Engin are examples, and there's dozens of orgs on campus or hundreds of orgs on campus. So getting involved shows that you can work within teams, you're a people person, and you also have passions beyond just your studies. Fifth is certifications. This is a little bit difficult to obtain, especially from sort of accredited, accredited sources. For example, this is kind of like what your education is. It's really just an accreditation of your degree. But there are like places like for specific softwares like AutoCAD, you can get certifications for that. And even things like LinkedIn Learning, those sort of act as certifications, although on a lesser extent because it's pretty easy to get. But this is sort of accreditation that like you are capable or certified in a specific topic. So those are also great. Coursework taken, just listing out your courses and like what you learned basically, not as important, but you can still always add it if you need fillers. Origin scholarships, if you were awarded something, it shows that you definitely were amongst the top candidate and you excelled at something, or you were deemed meritable for that specific award or scholarship. And last two, less important, but volunteering and interests. So I would put these in your resume if you are limited in experience. And a big side note is if you don't have an internship lined up, make sure you work on these experiences and skills. They don't just sit around. You can definitely work on your resume, even if you don't have an internship lined up. Also research. That's the last thing I would include on this list. So let me take you on my own personal resume journey. I don't have a magic carpet, or I can't really show you the world at the current state of the pandemic, but I can show you what my resume was like throughout the past 5 to 6 years. So it's a pretty long journey. Hopefully you can trust me now. So I'll take you guys on that journey. So this started all in my sophomore year of high school. So this is my first start. And honestly, it's not that great. To be honest, as a hiring manager, I would just skip on this. I applied to programs when I was a sophomore. I didn't really get rejected. I didn't really get accepted anywhere, or I didn't really interview. So, everyone has, the moral of the story is like everyone has somewhere to start, right? And it's okay to have a pretty poor resume as you're starting. But any start is better than no start. So I would say start early. And it takes multiple revisions to get to a better state. So 1 year later, junior year, this is my resume in 2017. And this was actually what I used to get my first internship after my junior year of high school. It's not great for many means. Honestly, it's like the same thing as my previous one. but there's colors and there's more technical depth. I added more project and skills, but I think the color sort of made it interesting. Uh, Actually, with this, there's more leadership. So I included involvement with cross country and founding a makerspace back in high school. And it's actually the one poor thing was that it was over 2 pages. So that was not too great. And same thing, I didn't really have that much added experience, but it's primarily like selling myself on the fact that I had skills, which came from like um, my schoolwork with AutoCAD and programming, and that I was involved in some sort of activities within high school. So even if you don't have as much like experience, remember that like your resume is sort of a product, and you're trying to sell that product to the hiring manager. So next is the sort of fall of 2017 or like early 2018. So I just want to share this because this was one version and it was sort of an experimental version. Um, and it was more like self-discovery. So I added a lot more projects this time. And this was after my first internship with Con Edison. And for a high school student, it's pretty good. But I would actually stray away from the 2 column aspect. I think overall, this is more so the biggest changes are the substance. The design, I don't know. I can't really say. I thought at the time I really liked it, but for a recruiter, this can be pretty difficult to digest. So and one sort of quirky thing was that back then I would sort of do like um, this resume was sort of like meant to be like as an origami piece, so I could fold it into a business card. But honestly, just don't do that. Just keep it to the standard of like having a separate business card and a separate resume, because no recruiter wants to have folded paper. So that was sort of just like a fun thing that I did just to like self experiment with styling. But resumes just keep it pretty simple, and so that recruiters can just go through each of them. All right, so college time. I won't dwell on this too much because it's pretty boring / cookie cutter. But I think this one is probably one of my favorites. It's really well organized and really digestible. And I've used the standard for maybe a year and a half. But honestly, sadly, outside of ITS during my freshman year, I didn't really get too many offers from different companies. And I think that's like a big story, like for everyone. Like your resume isn't really just because you have a great resume doesn't mean that you will be getting offers lined up like right in front of you. And well, specifically to this resume, I think it's a pretty big step up. Uh, the only big changes that I would really make is the size font. It's a little small, although this is at a 75% scale. I think that's one big thing that I would sort of increase in the font, and I would probably decrease the contents just by a little bit, just so it's more readable. But this is pretty standard amongst like resume templates, and it's pretty well organized. And with regards to like sort of, even if you have a great resume, there's things like networking that's a lot more powerful. So with this resume, I didn't go into any new companies. I sort of returned to my old company, and it sort of just goes to show that like your resume doesn't really mean much, and it's more so like your network that sort of carries you forward. So because I had a great relationship with the internship coordinator as like a mentor mentee throughout the time, there's this story sort of like as where I almost got fired, but I found a new home. And then on my last internship at Conis, and I actually was managed under that internship coordinator because I had sustained that relationship. So, networking is always important, and I'm happy to go over it in a future for a Fireside Chats talk. Anyways, so moving on, your resume is important. I'm just saying that networking is just as important. So this is my sophomore year resume during the winter, and this was sort of in the middle of the pandemic. And looking back at this, I could sort of just say like, yikes. There's good and bad aspects to this, but the good is that, or the purpose that I was trying to convey was that I had a lot of experience. within school and without school, or within my extracurricular activities, and that I was capable. The bad aspect is that it's too much and it's quite overwhelming, even for myself looking back at it now. And it's difficult to get a sense of who am I and what is my story. It's very diluted in terms of the message. Um, interesting a lot enough, and this is sort of like a lesson that I've picked up on this, is that this is the one that uh, got noticed from my manager at Apple, and what got me in, or caught my manager's attention, because I did research with machine learning and neural networks. And although I didn't really like the experience, I still put it into my resume, and that was sort of what caught my manager's attention, and sort of translated within my work. So I think it's important that even if you have doubts about your experiences, that you still include them, because you don't know who it might land, like whose table it might land on, and that experience or that thing might offer you the next opportunity. So the last one is my current resume, or my anticipated resume. I won't self-critique it, but the message is to show that like there's sort of a journey between Michigan, Con Ed, my first original company, and Apple. And those are grouped by relevance instead of like exactly time order. Uh, People don't really have the capacity to remember more than three things at a time. So it's very important, even in presentations and more so your resumes. I lean less on my education and projects at this point, and I focus more on quality over quantity. And I think this is inspired from like LinkedIn. I sort of take away from that design, and it's extremely personalized for me, and that should be the case for everyone. Just that because I stuck with some of the organizations throughout my career, I was able to group them like this. But with your resumes, they should be tailored specifically to you. And again, this is 5 to 6 years in the making, which is a very, very long time. And it takes practice and a lot of revisions to get your resume to the way to like at its peak or its tip-top shape. Same thing with your outfits. It's going to take a lot of time, so you got to keep continually working on it. All right, so closing up, these are some tools that I wish I knew. So specifically here, I have a resume template that's from a Drive or a Docs file that you can download. And another resume template site is this Resume Worded. It has tons of resumes, and it takes like 30 seconds to get connected with like your Google, your Gmail. And you have tons of like templates to take from. For engineers, ECRC is a great resource if you want to set up appointments. Same thing with the UCC for non-engineers. VMock is also a great resume. It's a scanner, so it will give you feedback, although I would take it with a grain of salt because it's configured to however the ECRC or the UCC might like it. So that's the only caveat. So don't take it too seriously, especially with the numbers. And then with finding internships or jobs, engineering careers for engineers, and Handshake for everyone within the university. I've also included some sort of people that, some articles and resources, so you can take a look at that as well. All right, other parting advice. The biggest one is that your resume is more powerful than your transcript. So what this means is that nobody really reads your transcript, right? So no hiring manager is actually going to be like, hey, this person got an A in physics or an F in math 115. No one will ever do that. They might look at your GPA, but no one will ever read your transcript. But your resume is something that you can change. Your transcript's permanent, but your resume is something that you can specifically, add or remove or put in things. So, and your resume will be a document that you'll take throughout the rest of your career. And that is why it's more powerful. It's something you can change. It's always changing. It's not a one-time document. It should reflect your journey as a work professional. And every month or quarterly, you should really be updating your resume. And again, there's no perfect resume. Always find ways to improve it. And it'll take years to get it up to its peak. Update your resume as often as you can, or when you finish an internship or a job or an experience, just update it since it's fresh in your mind. And the last thing is with regards to feedback. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Um, if someone's ripping your resume apart, as in they annotate and remove stuff, uh, really thank them because they're doing it right. As long as they're actually providing good feedback, because it's not helpful to have someone just read your resume for like 5 minutes and say like here's X thing that you can improve. If they're actually putting things onto paper and providing those suggestions, that is a lot more powerful than a 5-minute read. And that being said, thank you all for attending this Fire Chats. And if you would like to get your resume reviewed, feel free to stop by my office hours. It's Fridays, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And you can arrange that on the UMich calendar or the First Gen Engine calendar. And it's also linked on the top of this presentation on the right. And you can talk about any ideas, events, or improvements for First Gen Engine in terms of the student org. You can talk to me for a resume review or a LinkedIn profile review, or about the IOE program or my student experience here at Michigan, as well as some of the interests and like about New York City, cycling, finance, or internships. I'm pretty open to that. Don't forget to follow our social medias pages. So First Gen Engine at Instagram, UMich First Gen Engine at Facebook. And lastly, feel free to reach out to us through email. And to get a copy of this presentation, just click on this link to get to the survey, and it'll have a bunch of topics that we will potentially discuss in the future. All right, so more Fire Chats to come. Thank you all for attending.